Okay, I started recording, and 3, 2, 1, we are reacting to this true story.
Okay.
I live on Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada.
Okay, so I'm Landon Show, and this is Spider-Man 2006. The channel, but then I stopped it, and because then there was a big fight, and nobody wanted to do it, and then our cameraman decided she wanted to get in on the fight, and then stopped recording, and then made a whole fool of us, and we all were making fools.
The kid was abducted from a park in my neighborhood, and it quickly became a very high-profile case, and it still is today. I was around 3 years old when this happened, and my dad would have been 25-ish, only a few years into his career as a police officer. The missing kid part will come into play a little bit later, but it's important to know that this was going on when the events of this story were happening. My dad and his partner were on patrol one night, and they had a camera guy with them who was on a ride-along to film some shitty Canadian version of Cops or something. I don't think that this ever actually aired, for reasons that will become obvious. It was unusual to allow someone along with a camera, and nowadays this would probably never happen. It was an otherwise quiet night, and as they were driving around, my dad spots this work van that belonged to a guy named Peter Hogben. My dad had pulled Hogben over before several times, the most recent being a few days prior because Hogben's insurance was expired. At that time, Hogben had a dead chicken hanging from his rearview mirror. This was really weird and very creepy, but not illegal. My dad let him off with a warning and told Hogben to get insurance, or the next time that he saw him, the van would be getting towed. So my dad and his partner see this van, and my dad gets dispatched to run it. And it comes back still without insurance, so they throw on the lights and pull Hogben over. Meanwhile, the cameraman is still filming all of this. They get out of the car and Hogben is pissed. He's yelling, eyes bugging out of his head, getting in my dad and his partner's space, probably veins bulging out of his neck, all of that. My dad explains that since he has no insurance that they were towing his vehicle. My dad said he remembers thinking Hogben was going to attack them, so they both had their hands on their holsters in case they needed to draw. Police shootings here are extremely rare, and in the 90s even more so. So the fact that they even felt it necessary to be ready to draw their sidearm shows how intense the situation was. While Hogben didn't end up attacking either my dad, his partner, or the camera.
As a matter of fact, do the two girls still live there?
No.
They moved?
Oh, well, one of them does, but the other one, the little girl doesn't.
Aww.
Let's go.
Okay.
Man, he did end up going full-on Hulk on the dash of his van, basically ripping it apart with his bare hands and losing his entire mind. These days, he'd probably be taken into custody based on that, but again, this was the early 90s. So while this was crazy and scary, it wasn't illegal. He shit-kicked his own car for a bit, tore out parts of the dashboard, and then, preternaturally, just calmed the fuck down. And then asked if he could get the tools from the back of his van, as he was a construction worker and needed them for his job the next day. My dad and his partner said that he could, so he grabbed an axe and his tool belt, which included a hammer and some other stuff, and off he walked into the night. As he walked away, my dad's partner said, "Jesus, man, he looks mad enough to kill someone." The entire incident was caught on camera by their ride-along camera guy.
Can you show us footage?
They towed Hogben's van, and their night went on as usual. Which is to say that nobody lost their shit and destroyed the dash of their own vehicles. The next night was their second night shift. They went to briefing, which is like a meeting before you begin your shift, so that you know if you need to look out for anything specifically, or if you need to do curfew checks on people who are under conditions after being released from jail and that kind of thing. When they get there, they hear the news that a woman was beaten to death the night prior and found in the early morning, and that if they have anyone they suspect or any files they think are related, that they should let their sergeant know so he could pass it on to detectives. My dad said he and his partner just looked at each other and then raised their hands to say, "I think we know who did this." Hogben was arrested very quickly after. Turns out, he was in fact pissed enough to kill someone. He initially followed another woman, but she managed to get into her house without Hogbin actually doing anything to her, aside from scaring the shit out of her by stalking her. The woman he did kill was completely random. He beat her to death with the blunt end of his axe where her blood and DNA were found. The evidence that convicted him was overwhelming. Okay, so here's the part where the missing kid comes into play. The FBI's behavioral unit was here to assist on creating a profile on who may have abducted the kid. They caught wind of the Hogbin file and that the entire incident preceding the murder where Hogbin was pulled over was caught on tape. They immediately demanded to see the tape, and when they did, they explained that it is extremely rare to capture the moment when a psychopath snaps and decides to kill someone on video, and that they wanted to take the video back to Quantico for training purposes so that they can show recruits what it looks like when someone makes that decision. So my dad and his partner are in a video used for training in the FBI. My dad has said he thinks his former partner carries a lot of guilt for this case because of the remark he made about Hogbin being angry enough to kill someone. I'm of the opinion it wasn't anybody's fault, and since that happened, people are able to be arrested for that kind of behavior. They were also both still rookie cops, and within that situation, they did everything right in a by-the-book sense. They didn't have the grounds to arrest Hogbin then, but I still understand why he'd feel so fucked up about it. In case you're wondering what happened with the missing kid, he's still missing. The FBI unit couldn't reach a full consensus on whether a family member or a stranger abducted him. The kid's name is Michael Donaghy, and if you're from
It's not me.
Canada, you've likely heard of him. He became the cautionary tale our parents told us about talking to strangers. His absence permeated the childhood of my friends and I, to the point where we once found some deer bones and were convinced we found Michael's remains.
To be honest, I don't think he's alive. Sorry, just putting it out there.
They just said they found his remains.
No, they said they thought.
My mom has been a police officer for 2 years, and she was recently put on FTO for the patrol division a few months ago. For those of you that don't know what FTO is, it stands for Field Training Officer. Essentially, when a cop switches from one team to another, they're paired with an FTO who teaches them all about how to do their job in the new division. My mom moved from working in the jail to working on the patrol team. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that patrol is an extremely dangerous division to be a part of. On patrol, a cop is out there by themselves with no idea of what they might face. In my mom's case, she had one other person with her, which is a little safer, but not by much.
Exactly.
On patrol, a backup car could be miles away, which puts the officer in an extremely dangerous and vulnerable position should anything bad happen on the road. What you should know is that the county I live in is known for being one of the safest, most cop-friendly counties in the U.S. You would think that they gave my mom and her FTO some
You finished?
Yeah, no, wait.
over the bad guys.
Sorry, guys. A
You wouldn't
little
think.
something came up.
On September 2nd, my mom and her FTO received a call that there was a suicidal man with a gun who was holding up in his house. They raced over to the scene and parked the car several yards from the house, as was customary of arriving on any scene. This guy lived in a semi-rural part of town where houses were spread a little bit apart. This rural-ish neighborhood backs up to a middle and elementary school on one side, and there's also a hospital and a daycare just behind the schools, which will be important later. Anyway, my mom and her training officer exit the car and begin to approach the house to contact this armed, suicidal man. The two stopped dead in their tracks when they heard a gunshot being fired off right at them.
Okay.
My mom and her FTO scrambled to get behind the doors of the patrol car and frantically radio for backup. My mom's FTO quickly pulls out his rifle for better defense. Several other cars rush to the scene just as the guy charges out of the house, firing shots off at random. Bang, one shot. Seconds later, several more are fired off in the direction of the officers. They begin firing just as a strange sound grabs everyone's attention. A school bell.
Oh, goodness.
Shit, school just ended for about 1,000 middle school students, who would soon be gathering in buses, cars, and worst yet, walking home. The suspect heard the school bell too and quickly rushed into his RV, driving off in the direction of the school. All the while, this asshole is firing off shots at the officers. As officers chase after him, attempting to cut him off, shoot out his tires, anything,
I would shoot his
a
tires.
haunting call comes over the radio.
Officer down.
Everyone at the call had no time to lose. They had to keep going and chase down the perp. They had to make sure he didn't get the chance to get to those middle school students. People were frantic, asking questions and looking for answers which no one knew. Holy shit, who's hit? Are they alive? Did anyone else get hit? Suddenly, someone cried out that it was my mom who got hit.
Oh, God.
Within minutes, I got dozens of texts asking if I knew what was going on, if I was okay, and some just informing me that my mom was shot. At the time, I was at work with no knowledge that any of this was happening. I stepped into the hall after receiving multiple text messages. I fell to my knees. My mom was shot.
Where?
She was dead or dying.
I would use the word dying.
I could feel myself break. This fucker killed my mom. Moments later, everyone got word that the threat had been eliminated. One of the officers shot the guy through the window of his RV just as he entered the hospital parking lot. There was still no word of what was happening to my mom. I was panicking. She's dead, I thought. Suddenly, I felt my phone buzz once again. I checked it with tears in my eyes. It read,
Hey, I don't know what you heard, but I'm okay. I wasn't the one that got shot.
My heart fell, but this time in relief. What had happened was that one of my mom's former co-workers in the jail had been listening in on the shooting situation, and had heard that my mom was first on the scene, and then later heard that someone was shot. In his shock, he put two and two together and assumed that the one that was shot was my mom. However, a SWAT deputy who arrived with the impact team had attempted to eliminate the threat and keep him away from the middle school students. The suspect brutally shot the SWAT deputy point blank in the chest with an AK-47 round. The deputy was rushed off to the hospital.
I don't think
He was dead when they got him off the ground and into the ambulance.
that's what I thought.
Using electric shock therapy, they brought him back to life, but moments later his heart stopped again.
Oh.
At the hospital, they shocked him again for several minutes before he came back to life.
Hooray.
And after being rushed into emergency trauma surgery, his heart stopped again. At this point, the doctor literally held his heart in his hands and was squeezing his
guys.
heart by hand to get it to begin beating again. After several surgeries, the deputy survived. He lost a lot of blood, brain cells, and body control.
Yeah.
But he is alive to this day, thankfully. I still can hardly believe that something this traumatic happened in my quiet, safe town. But I am so glad they took that fucker out, and I'm so glad all the officers are still alive today.
I'm sorry. I don't know how these cops do it, but I would never be a cop.
Okay, so actually,
we'll end it
our
right here because
video
I
will
am running out of battery.
yeah, so sorry guys, but peace.
Peace.